Hi, my name is Anne, and I'm from France. Today I'm going to tell you my amazing story. It may seem to you like the plot of a romantic series. You might even think I'm making it up. And I understand you. It's not every day that a humble, hardworking girl falls in love with a millionaire and he falls in love with her. But believe me, that's exactly what happened to me. Subscribe and put a thumbs up if you're interested in how I went from being a janitor to a millionaire. Oops, seems like enough spoilers for the first few minutes. Well, my adventures began with the move. My mother and I came to this town about a month ago. The occasion was very sad. My parents realized they could no longer live under the same roof and decided to divorce. Mom didn't want to stay in a town where every house, every sign reminded her of her failed marriage. So we packed our bags and hit the road. I got a job at a little cafe in a quiet neighborhood. I really liked that neighborhood. There were old 2-story houses and so many flowers. The cafe was on a corner and had a very cozy terrace with red and yellow roses. I was very lucky. I was going to work with pleasure. Mostly locals came to our cafe, so everyone knew each other. "Good afternoon, Mr. Barry," I said hello to my guest, smiling. "How are you doing? What can I get you?"
Hello, sweetheart. I'm fine, thank you. I'll have the usual, coffee and your wonderful croissants.
The man didn't even look at the menu because he kept getting the same thing. I even wondered how he wasn't getting tired of eating croissants every day. As I was picking up the order, I felt someone watching me. I looked around the room, and all the guests were minding their own business, and no one was looking in my direction. Then I noticed another guest. He was sitting in the far corner of the terrace, so I didn't see him at first, and he was a stranger to me. When I went to the table to take the order, I noticed that the stranger was dressed very well, and it surprised me, but I didn't want to be distracted from my work because of such trivialities. I brought him an orange juice with ice and a piece of cake, and I was about to leave when the young man said, "You're very nice." His compliment embarrassed me a little, and I blushed. Thank you. "We'll meet again," he said as I left. Before I went home, I gathered the chairs from the terrace and closed the cafe. Suddenly, Miller, my boyfriend, came up to me and hugged me from behind. We'd been dating for a few weeks, and we'd met when I first came to town. "Hey, Anna," he said. "I thought I'd walk you out. It's dark after all." Then he pulled a rose out of my hair, which I had attached there. "I hate roses." The guy wrinkled his nose. I didn't say anything back, though his words made me a little upset. I loved roses. And we headed home. On the way home, Miller talked about his day, about his plans, about what he'd had for breakfast. Suddenly I realized that he hadn't once asked me how I was doing, how I was feeling. His chatter gave me a headache, and I was even glad when he left. "You can't do that, Anna. He is, after all, your boyfriend," I said to myself as I opened the door. My mother was sitting in the kitchen waiting for me. Dinner was already on the table. She saw my worried and tired expression. "Is something wrong? Are you okay?" I told her about my day, ending with a mention about Miller. "Your father was the same way. I didn't notice it at first, but over the years it made me more and more upset. You know how it ended." "Of course I do. Divorce." My mother advised me to break up with Miller, but I decided to hold off on that for now. The next day was my day off. I went to the mall. I wanted to please myself and buy a new dress. I chose a beautiful blue color, which is very suitable for my eyes. I put it on right away because Miller and I were going out on a date, and only half an hour was left until the appointed time. I decided to stop by my favorite bakery to get something to eat. I sat at one of the tables drinking my coffee and looking at the guests. One in particular caught my eye because he looked so much like my boyfriend. I looked closely. It was Miller! But why was he hugging some black-haired girl? I didn't know what I was doing, so I walked over to the couple. "Who is it, honey?" the brunette asked in surprise. "Honey?" I asked again. "Why are you calling him that?" "Isn't it obvious? He's my boyfriend." "Miller's my boyfriend!" I exclaimed. The stranger and I looked at each other, then stared at Miller. "What is this supposed to mean?"
"I couldn't choose, so I started dating both of you. What, does anyone have a problem with that?"
"Of course!" In one voice we shouted. I was so angry. I trusted him. He was my first boyfriend, and I managed to fall in love. I ran out of the cafe in tears. I didn't know how I ended up in the park, in the business part of town. I sank down on the bench and covered my face with my hands.
What happened, Miss Rose?
The voice sounded familiar. I pulled my hands away from my face, looked up, and saw the rich guest from the cafe. Miss Rose? That's not my name.
The rose in your hair looked very beautiful.
The young man sat down beside me and handed me a handkerchief.
I told you we would meet.
I smiled. He really did say that. A few days later, I quit the cafe. I didn't like being in a place where my ex-boyfriend had breakfast every day. One day, I was looking at job openings, and one ad made me really interested. They needed a maid in a house near mine. For some reason, applicants were not expected to have any experience or special skills, so I decided to give it a try. I filled out an application form on the website and waited for an answer. It came almost immediately. I was given an appointment for an interview in 2 days. To be honest, I was very nervous. I assumed the house would be gorgeous, but I had no idea it would be this gorgeous. I rang the front doorbell and the butler opened the door. He ushered me into the house and then to the door of the house owner's study and told me to wait. I sat down on the edge of a chair. Everything around sparkled with cleanliness and dignity. After half an hour of waiting, a girl came out of the room. What was my surprise when I recognized her as Miller's brunette? She looked at me angrily. "Don't you try to take my job away from me," she hissed and stepped closer. Then she yanked her dress so hard that it ripped. "Hey!" she shouted. "Somebody help me! That girl tore my dress!" Immediately, the butler appeared. But I didn't do anything. I didn't even touch her. I tried to justify myself, but the butler wouldn't listen. He took me by the arm and would have thrown me out of the mansion if the door of the master's office hadn't swung open. The master was... Yes, you aren't wrong. It was the same guy I met in the park. He called out to the butler.
Hey, let her go. I know Miss Rose. She wouldn't do something like that.
For some reason, I wasn't even surprised to learn that my new acquaintance was a millionaire. As you might have guessed, I was hired without any trouble.
Well, Miss Rose,
my new boss smiled at me.
I expect you to work on Monday.
It was pretty weird that he still called me Miss Rose, even though I had introduced myself in the park, but I decided to ignore it. On Monday morning, I got up earlier than usual. Before my first day of work in such a posh house, I was very nervous, so I decided to take a little walk around the town. Spoiler, it didn't work out for me. In the park, I met my employer. He was drinking coffee, leaning against a tree. It's hard to deny the obvious. He was unusually handsome. He had black hair and strong arms.
Good morning, Miss Rose.
Oh, I didn't see you there, I said with embarrassment. I didn't even realize it was time to go to work.
I'll give you a ride,
my boss suddenly offered. He hurried off to some meeting and I started cleaning up. Mr. Dantali and I started seeing more of each other. Every day he brought me a white rose from his garden. His mother planted those roses, the gardener once told me.
The landlord won't even let me touch them, and he picks you one almost every day.
Butterflies fluttered in my stomach. Was I in love? No way. Loving Mr. Dantalian is like loving Leonardo DiCaprio. Well, I guess it's time to make the only right decision. I went to my boss's office. It was empty. I ripped out a page from my notebook and I wrote that I was quitting. I gave the address where to send my first month's paycheck and left the mansion. Tears streamed down my cheeks, but I ran home without stopping. By the time I reached my street, it was already dark. I could hardly move my legs and was walking to my house when suddenly I heard a suspicious noise. When I turned around, I saw the brunette with whom Miller had been cheating on me, surrounded by some men. She took my job and my boyfriend, she told her friends, pointing at me. We have to teach her a lesson. They headed my way, and I felt I couldn't move from exhaustion and fear.
I knew I shouldn't have left you alone.
Someone sighed behind me. A man stepped out of the shadows, and we all recognized him as Mr. Dantalian. He took my hand and led the way.
If you go near her again, I won't be responsible for myself.
The black-haired girl kicked the stone angrily, and we left in a hurry.
Where have you gone?
Mr. Dantalian asked me when we got to my house.
Don't go away.
He made me face him and gently took my hands in his. Why?
Because I love you, Miss Rose.
For a moment, I thought there were tears in his eyes. I wanted to say something, but in the same second, my eyes went black and I fainted. I woke up in the morning, and the first thing I smelled was the scent of roses. A bouquet of white flowers was right beside my bed. I was not at home. All the furniture in the room was very expensive and beautiful. Someone came into the room. Mr. Dantalian?
Roy.
My former boss corrected me.
I hope you like the bouquet. Are you feeling all right?
He acted as if nothing had happened, and he hadn't confessed his love to me last night. I got scared. What if I was just dreaming? Mr. Dantalian, I love you too. I blurted out and closed my eyes so I didn't have to see his reaction. He didn't answer at first, but then there was a whisper right above my ear.
I'm happy.
And his lips touched mine. My story ended happily. Even though my first boyfriend betrayed me, I'm sure everything happens for the best. After losing one person, I met another. Has this ever happened to you? Tell your story in the comments, and I'll be sure to read each one. Don't forget to share this video with anyone who might benefit from it. And of course, subscribe to the channel.